1 year had passed since the war ended. The galaxy was different now. Better in some ways, more complicated in others. The quarantine around human space was gone. Earth was a full member of the collective union, though their role remained unique. Humanity had become the galaxy's military advisors, their defense coordinators, and strangely, their voice of peace. Admiral Day retired from active command. She now lived on a restored space station orbiting a world the Devourers had once devastated. The planet below was green again, forests growing where there had been only bare rock. The Reclaimed, as the former Devourers now called themselves, had kept their promise. They were rebuilding everything they had destroyed. Day stood before a memorial wall in the station's central plaza. Names covered every surface: human soldiers, collective warriors, civilian casualties, everyone lost in the war. She placed her hand on the cold metal and whispered words she said every day. "We didn't fight to be heroes. We fought so our children wouldn't have to." A young human girl tugged at Day's sleeve. "Are you Admiral Day? The one who fought the monsters?" Day knelt down to the child's level. "I fought in the war, yes. My teacher says you were brave. She says you saved everyone." Day smiled sadly. "I didn't save everyone, I just tried to save as many as I could. Remember that, okay? Heroes aren't people who win without cost. They're people who pay the cost and keep going anyway." Commander Tay lived in the Reclaimed sector now. Earth's government asked him to serve as ambassador to the former Devourers. His near sacrifice during the final battle had earned him unique trust from the hive mind, or what remained of it. The consciousness was fragmenting. Individual Reclaimed were developing distinct personalities, thoughts, desires. The transformation was slow and awkward, but it was happening. Tay sat in a biodome with a group of young Reclaimed, showing them old Earth comedy videos. The creatures watched with confusion, trying to understand laughter. One Reclaimed, who had chosen the name Kel, tilted its head. "Why do humans make sounds when they are happy? It seems inefficient." "Because sometimes efficiency isn't the point," Tay explained. "Sometimes we express joy just to share it with others. That's what laughter is. Shared happiness." Kel tried to laugh. The sound was strange and mechanical, but it was an attempt. "Progress," Tay wrote in his journal that night. "Teaching former Devourers to be people is the strangest assignment I've ever had. But I think we're succeeding. They're learning empathy, individual identity, even humor. Maybe in another generation, no one will remember they were once the galaxy's nightmare." Major Sue left military service after the war. She founded a cross-species military academy on Mars, training soldiers from dozens of collective species. But she taught more than tactics. She taught military ethics, rules of engagement, protection of civilians. Everything that made soldiers into protectors rather than killers. In one of her lectures, she addressed a classroom of mixed-species cadets. "Humans aren't good at war because we love violence. We're good at it because we understand what violence costs. Every weapon you learn to use should make you more hesitant to use it, not less. The best warrior is the one who knows when not to fight." A Vrex cadet raised her hand. "But instructor, humans fought so aggressively during the war. How does that match what you're teaching?" Sue nodded. "Good question. We fought aggressively because the alternative was extinction. But we also showed mercy when we could have finished the Devourers. Power without restraint is just destruction. Power with wisdom is defense. Learn to tell the difference." Captain Jin commanded an exploration fleet now, mixed crews of humans and collective species, exploring unknown regions of space. His ship included several Reclaimed observers, learning about the galaxy they had once tried to consume. During one mission, they encountered an uncontacted civilization just developing spaceflight. The collective officers suggested observation protocols. The Reclaimed suggested evaluating resources. Jin overrode everyone. "We leave them alone. They develop at their own pace, make their own mistakes, find their own path. We don't interfere unless they ask for help. That's the new rule." It became policy. The collective adopted it across the board. First contact would be on the other species' terms, not theirs. It was a human idea that changed how the galaxy worked. Ambassador Hana served as Earth's chief diplomat now. She traveled constantly between worlds, negotiating treaties, resolving disputes, building connections. She had become something of a celebrity. Her speeches about cooperation and unity were famous. But in private moments with Ambassador Talon, she admitted her doubts. "We saved the galaxy," Hana said over drinks in a quiet bar on a neutral station. "But did we change it? Or did we just teach them to fear us differently?" Talon, now the collective's chief human relations officer, considered the question carefully. "You changed us. The collective spent 3,000 years avoiding conflict. You showed us that sometimes conflict is necessary. But you also showed us that victory without mercy is just another form of defeat. We're learning balance. That's your gift to us." Human culture had exploded across the collective. Music, art, literature, philosophy. Some species embraced it eagerly. Others resisted, seeing it as cultural contamination. On a collective university world, students debated human philosophy in a crowded lecture hall. "Human philosophy is obsessed with conflict," one student argued. "Good versus evil, order versus chaos. It's exhausting and primitive." Another student countered, "Because they lived through real conflict. They earned the right to think deeply about it. We spent 3,000 years in peace and learned nothing about ourselves. Humans spent 300 years in isolation and came out understanding survival better than any of us." The debate raged for hours. Both sides had valid points. That was the thing about humanity's influence. It complicated everything, but it also made the galaxy more honest about its own nature. The new peace was tested when civil war broke out among the Vrel species. Two factions fought for control of their government, and the violence threatened to destabilize an entire sector. The collective prepared to send peacekeepers. They looked to humanity for military support. President Yoon's response surprised everyone. "No, we won't fight your civil wars, but we'll mediate. We'll negotiate. Violence is our last resort, not our first response." Ambassador Hana led the negotiations. She used every trick learned from centuries of human diplomacy: compromise, creative solutions, appeals to shared interest, and occasionally, quiet reminders of what would happen if they forced Earth to intervene militarily. After 4 months of tense discussions, the Vrel factions signed a peace treaty. It wasn't perfect. Resentments remained. But the treaty held. The galaxy realized something important. Humanity was more than their weapons. They understood conflict, in all its forms, including how to end it without bloodshed. The Reclaimed made an announcement that shocked everyone. Through Commander Tay, they revealed that they wanted to give up their hive mind completely. Individual Reclaimed were developing so rapidly that the collective consciousness could no longer contain them. They were becoming separate people with separate thoughts. "We asked the collective for guidance," Kel, speaking as a representative, said at a formal gathering. "We were once united by hunger. Now we wish to be diverse by choice. How do we become individuals?" It was a question the collective had never faced. A hive mind voluntarily fragmenting into billions of individuals. The process would take generations, but it had begun. The species that once consumed entire civilizations was choosing to become people, one individual at a time. Earth hosted a memorial ceremony on the 1-year anniversary of the war's end. Leaders from across the collective attended. The Reclaimed sent representatives, individual drones who spoke haltingly but sincerely about regret and redemption. The most powerful moment came when a Reclaimed individual met a collective survivor whose entire family had been consumed. The survivor, an elderly being from a now-extinct homeworld, stood face to face with one of the creatures responsible. "How do I forgive you?" the survivor asked, voice breaking. The Reclaimed individual, who had chosen the name Mira in honor of Counselor Mira, who had advocated for their chance at redemption, spoke carefully. "We don't ask forgiveness. We cannot undo what was done. We can only ask for time to become worthy of your mercy, as humanity gave us time, as you are giving us time now." The survivor touched Mira's carapace gently. Then use that time well. Become what we wish you had always been. We will, Mira promised, or we will die trying. The next generation was growing up in a different galaxy. Human children attended schools alongside collective species and reclaimed young. Mixed crews explored space together. Joint colonies were established. On one colony, a human engineer named Jiho worked alongside a Vrex architect and a reclaimed biologist to design a new city. The meeting was chaotic. Jiho wanted efficiency. The Vrex wanted beauty. The reclaimed wanted organic integration. They argued for hours before finally finding a compromise that included all three visions. The result was messy and imperfect, but alive with possibility. This is how it should be, Jiho said, looking at the final designs. Different perspectives working together. Not despite our differences, but because of them. 6 months into the war, humanity had destroyed 11 devourer breeding worlds. The hive mind controlled less territory than before, but the fighting had become desperate. Every battle cost more lives. Every victory felt hollow. The war had reached a stalemate where both sides bled, but neither could land a final blow. Commander Tay's reconnaissance AI finally made the breakthrough everyone needed. After analyzing 6 months of devourer movements and communication patterns, the AI identified a possible location for their home system. Hidden deep in a nebula called the Shadow Veil, a region the collective had marked as uninhabitable, the AI estimated a 70% probability. It was their best chance. Earth's Security Council debated for 12 hours. President Yoon sat at the head of the table, looking older than she had 6 months ago. Admiral Day presented the plan via hologram from her flagship. Operation Final Dawn. We take every available ship and punch straight into the nebula. Find their home world. End this. What's the projected casualty rate? Yoon asked quietly. Day hesitated. 80%. Maybe higher. The nebula provides perfect cover for ambush. We'll be fighting blind most of the way. But if we succeed, we end the war. If we don't, we buy the collective time to fortify their borders. A suicide mission, General Petrov said flatly. Yes, Day agreed. But necessary. Ambassador Hana spoke up. Before we commit to genocide, we should try one more time to communicate. Offer peace. Give them a chance to surrender. Some representatives laughed. The devourers had never responded to communication attempts. But Yoon raised her hand for silence. Draft a message, Ambassador. We send it before we attack. At least we'll know we tried. The message was broadcast into the Shadow Veil Nebula in every language and format. Ambassador Hana wrote it personally, choosing each word carefully. To the devourer hive mind, humanity offers one chance for peace. Cease all attacks, withdraw to your home system, and we establish a neutral zone. Reject this offer and we will end your species. You have 24 hours to respond. 24 hours passed in tense silence. No response came. The devourer attacks continued as before, showing no sign of considering the offer. Humanity interpreted this as rejection. Operation Final Dawn is authorized, President Yoon announced. May whatever gods still listen forgive us. The largest human fleet ever assembled gathered at Rally Point Omega. 200 warships. 50,000 personnel. Enough firepower to crack planets. Admiral Day stood on the bridge of her flagship Defiant, looking at the tactical display. So many ships, so many lives about to be risked. Major Su commanded the ground forces. 10,000 soldiers in assault carriers ready to deploy if they found the devourer homeworld. Captain Jin led the vanguard in the new Incheon 3, his third ship since the war began. Commander Tay monitored from Earth, his AI systems linked to every ship ready to coordinate in real time. The surprise came when 20 collective warships requested permission to join the attack. Captain Vera spoke for them via transmission. You taught us to fight. Now let us fight beside you. If you're going into hell, someone should watch your backs. Admiral Day felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maybe not just hope for victory, but hope that the galaxy could actually work together. She accepted the collective volunteers, placing them in the second wave where they'd be safer. The fleet entered the Shadow Veil Nebula. Immediately, sensors went chaotic. Visibility dropped to nearly zero. Navigation became guesswork. Every ship stayed close to its neighbors, afraid of getting separated in the dense clouds. Hours passed in terrible silence. Then the sensors lit up with thousands of contacts. The Devourers had been waiting. They emerged from the nebula clouds like nightmares. Hive ships twice the size of anything humanity had seen before, carriers launching endless swarms of biofighters, and something new. Massive organic creatures that generated electromagnetic pulses, disabling electronic systems across entire areas. The battle began instantly. Human ships fought brilliantly, but they were outnumbered 10-1. The Devourers had learned from every previous battle. They adapted to human tactics in real time. What should have been advantages became traps. Captain Jin's vanguard was surrounded within minutes. Major Su's carriers took heavy fire. The collective volunteers fought bravely but were quickly overwhelmed. Admiral Day realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't a hidden home system. This was a trap. The Devourers had let humanity find this location. They had prepared the perfect ambush. The fleet was going to be destroyed. "All ships, fall back," Day ordered. "Retreat to rally point." But retreating through the nebula was nearly impossible. Ships got separated. Formations broke apart. The Devourers pursued relentlessly. Human casualties mounted rapidly. Commander Tay watched his projections from Earth with growing horror. 80% casualties, then 85%. At this rate, the entire fleet would be gone within hours. Tay made a decision without authorization. His experimental ship, a small research vessel with a prototype faster-than-light drive, was in orbit around Earth. He boarded it alone and plotted a course to the Shadow Veil. He transmitted his plan to Admiral Day, then cut communication before she could order him to stop. The plan was simple and insane. Tay's research included a theoretical weapon, a device that could trigger a chain reaction in certain types of stellar material, like the dense gases in the Shadow Veil Nebula. The resulting explosion would destroy everything in the nebula. Human ships, Devourer forces, everything. But it would give the collective time to fortify their borders. It would buy the galaxy a future. Tay recorded a final message to his family. "I'm sorry I won't be coming home, but I'm buying humanity time to survive. Tell my brother to live well. Tell my parents I thought of them at the end. Tell Earth that someone had to make this choice." His ship penetrated deep into the nebula, moving faster than anything the Devourers expected. The experimental drive pushed boundaries of physics, tearing through space at speeds that damaged the ship with every second. Alarms screamed. Hull breaches appeared, but Tay kept going. He had to reach the nebula's core. Then something impossible happened. The Devourer swarms pulled back. All across the nebula, attacks ceased. Bioships stopped firing. The hive mind fell silent. Then a transmission flooded every frequency. Not language, but pure emotion transmitted directly. Kira, the telepath aboard Admiral Day's ship, gasped and clutched her head. Tears streamed down her face. "They're surrendering," she whispered in shock. "The hive mind is begging us to stop." Through Kira, the Devourer consciousness spoke for the first time. The message was broken, alien, but understandable. They were not mindless consumers. They were refugees. Their original home had been destroyed long ago by something ancient and terrible. They became Devourers to survive, consuming everything to build strength to find safety. They attacked the collective because they saw all advanced life as threats, remembering their own near extinction. But humanity's willingness to sacrifice everything, not just for victory but to save others, had shown them something they had forgotten. Mercy existed. Sacrifice for others existed. There was another way to survive beyond endless consumption. "We yield," the hive mind communicated through Kira. "We surrender. Please stop." Commander Tay's ship was seconds from detonation. The stellar ignition device was armed and ready. He had the power to end the Devourers forever. Complete the mission. Ensure humanity's victory. His finger hovered over the activation button.
He thought about his family.
About Earth. About the collective volunteers who had trusted humanity enough to fly into hell beside them. He thought about Admiral Day's words after the Frontier Station rescue. "We're not monsters. We just fight like them when we have to." With 3 seconds remaining, Tay deactivated the device. His ship's engines failed, leaving him stranded in the nebula's core. He transmitted to Admiral Day. Device deactivated. Standing by for recovery. I believe their surrender is genuine. Permission to negotiate? On the Defiance Bridge, Admiral Day faced the hardest decision of her life. Trust the Devourers and risk everything, or finish them while they were vulnerable. The Devourers had killed millions. They had consumed entire species. Every instinct said to end them now. But Day looked at her crew. Exhausted, injured, but still fighting. She looked at Captain Vera on the view screen, the collective warrior who had learned to trust humans. She looked at Ambassador Talon, who stood on her bridge during the battle, who had slowly become a friend. She thought about what humanity was supposed to represent. Not just violence, but the choice to be better. "Hold all fire," Day ordered. Collective Union, open a channel to the Devourer hive mind. Humanity is listening. What followed was the strangest negotiation in galactic history. The Devourers explained their needs through Kira's translation. A region of space far from inhabited worlds to call home. Resources to build sustainably instead of consuming. Most importantly, isolation until they could evolve beyond their survival instincts. In exchange, they would share their biological technology, retreat immediately, and submit to monitoring. Admiral Day listened carefully. Then she added her own terms. "You will help rebuild every world you destroyed. Every species you consumed has survivors. You will terraform. You will grow." 3 months had passed since Viridian Prime. The war had changed everything. Humanity no longer just defended worlds. They hunted. Across 12 systems, human forward operating bases turned abandoned planets into fortresses. The collective watched in amazement as humans built defenses in weeks that would have taken other species years. Captain Jin stood on the bridge of the Incheon 2, studying the star charts. His original ship had been destroyed in a battle 2 months ago, but he survived. Now he commanded a hunter-killer group. 6 fast ships designed for one purpose: tracking Devourer hive ships and destroying them before they could reach populated worlds. "Contact," his sensor officer reported. Devourer signatures bearing 273. 3 hive ships moving toward the Pelion system. Pelion had 2 billion inhabitants, mostly civilians, helpless against the Devourers. "All ships pursue course," Jin ordered. "Maximum burn. We intercept before they reach Pelion." His second officer looked concerned. "Sir, that puts us deep in Devourer territory." "No backup." Jin smiled coldly. "Good. They'll think they're safe. Then we remind them that nowhere is safe from human hunters." The tactic worked. The Incheon group caught the hive ships between star systems, far from support. Jin didn't broadcast warnings or demand surrender. He simply attacked. The hive ships tried to flee, but human ships were faster. Within an hour, all 3 were destroyed. No human casualties. Jin transmitted the victory to Admiral Day and moved to the next target. This was how humans fought now. Aggressive, relentless, giving the enemy no rest. But the Devourers were learning too. They began using new tactics. Suicide swarms that overwhelmed point defenses through sheer numbers. Acid attacks that ate through ship hulls. They even started mimicking human communication signals to set traps. The war became a deadly competition of adaptation. Commander Tay worked in his laboratory aboard Earth's orbital station, developing countermeasures. His AI drones now operated in swarms, creating chaos in Devourer formations. When the Devourers adapted to one pattern, the AI immediately switched to another. It was working, but barely. For every solution Tay created, the Devourers found a new problem to present. "They're getting smarter," Tay told his team. Or maybe they were always this smart and just didn't need to show it before. "Either way, this is becoming an arms race we might not win through technology alone." Major Sue agreed. She had spent the last month training collective soldiers in human combat tactics. The experience was frustrating. Most collective species were biologically weaker than humans. They weren't naturally aggressive. War didn't come easily to them. But some learned quickly. Captain Vera of Rex Warrior adapted to human tactics with enthusiasm. During a training exercise, she performed a boarding maneuver that impressed even Sue. "You fight like you want to win," Vera said afterward. "My people fight like we want to survive. There's a difference." "Survival is winning," Sue replied. "That's the first lesson. If you're not willing to do whatever it takes, you've already lost." Not everyone appreciated human methods. A peace faction emerged within the collective. They argued that humanity's brutality was no different from the Devourer's consumption. Ambassador Talon found himself defending human tactics to Counselor Mira, who grew more disturbed with each battle report. "They're using biological weapons now," Mira said, her crystalline body dimming with distress. "Weapons designed to disrupt Devourer reproduction. That's genocide." "That's war," Talon replied tiredly. He had changed over the past 3 months. The idealistic diplomat was gone. replaced by someone who understood harsh realities. The Devourers consume entire species. We're fighting extinction with controlled countermeasures. I don't like it either, Mira. But I like the alternative even less. The debate became irrelevant when the Devourers launched their counteroffensive. They had been gathering strength, preparing. When they struck, it was with overwhelming force. 3 human supply convoys were ambushed and destroyed. Outpost Delta went silent after a massive hive ship assault. 10,000 human personnel died in a single week, Earth's highest casualties since the war began. The collective expected humanity to reconsider, perhaps negotiate, pull back. Instead, President Yoon authorized something called Operation Scorched Earth. Admiral Day explained it to the Collective Council via hologram. The reaction was immediate and horrified. You want to crack planets? Counselor Mira's voice was shrill with shock. You're talking about weapons that violate every convention of civilized warfare. We never signed your conventions, Day replied calmly. And the Devourers aren't civilized. They're using barren moons as breeding grounds, hatching trillions of new drones. We need to destroy those breeding grounds. The most efficient method is relativistic kill vehicles. That's mass murder, another counselor protested. They're eggs, Day said flatly. Unhatched Devourers. Would you prefer we wait for them to hatch and consume another dozen species? This ends the war faster and saves lives in the long run. Ambassador Talon was asked to stop this, to convince humanity to show restraint. But when he tried to contact Admiral Day privately, she was surprisingly honest with him. I don't like it either, Ambassador, Day said. But I lost 10,000 soldiers last week. Good people, friends. Every day we don't end this war, more people die, human and collective alike. Moral purity is a luxury we can't afford. We're doing what's necessary to win because losing isn't an option. Operation Scorched Earth launched despite all protests. The target was a moon called Threshold, converted by the Devourers into a massive hatchery. Billions of eggs waited to hatch. The relativistic kill vehicle was a simple weapon. A solid mass accelerated to 90% light speed. No warhead needed. The kinetic energy alone was devastating. The impact was visible from 6 light-years away. The moon cracked apart like a broken egg. Trillions of Devourer eggs were vaporized instantly. The shockwave destroyed nearby hive ships. It was efficient, brutal, and completely effective. The Devourer response was immediate and terrifying. The hive mind experienced something it had never felt before. Rage. They abandoned all strategy and threw everything at human positions. The attacks became savage beyond anything seen before. They wanted revenge. Major Sue's battalion was stationed at Frontier Station, a human outpost on the edge of Devourer territory. When the attack came, it came with millions of Devourers, endless swarms that blocked out the stars. Sue's 3,000 soldiers faced an enemy that outnumbered them thousands to one. The battle lasted 14 hours. Human soldiers fought from fortifications using every weapon they had. Ammunition ran low. Then it ran out. Soldiers switched to powered armor alone, using fists and improvised weapons. The Devourers kept coming, climbing over their own dead to reach the humans. Sue knew they were finished. She sent a final transmission to Admiral Day. Tell Earth we held the line. Tell them we didn't break. Tell them, her voice caught. Tell my family I love them. But Admiral Day's response shocked everyone. Hold position, Major, we're coming to get you. The collective observers couldn't believe it. Captain Vera, monitoring from her ship, called Day directly. Admiral, Frontier Station is surrounded by millions of Devourers. Any rescue attempt is suicide. You'll lose your fleet. Then I lose my fleet, Day replied simply. But I don't lose my people. Humans don't abandon our own. Ever. That's not negotiable. Day assembled every available ship, 30 vessels. Not enough, but all she had. She gave a speech to her crews that would become famous. We're going into hell to pull our people out. The collective thinks this is suicide. They might be right, but we're human, and humans don't leave anyone behind. We're going to punch through that swarm, grab our people, and burn our way out. If anyone wants to transfer off, now's the time. Not a single person transferred. Every crew member volunteered. Captain Jin, who had just returned from a patrol, immediately requested to join the rescue fleet. We're with you, Admiral, he transmitted. All the way. The rescue fleet jumped into the Frontier Station system and immediately faced the Devourer swarm. The battle was apocalyptic. Human ships fought at ranges so close that weapons fire burned their own hulls. When missiles ran out, ships used their mass as weapons. Captain Jin's Incheon 2 deliberately rammed a hive ship to create an opening, destroying his ship but saving 3 others. Admiral Day's flagship, the Defiant, crashed through the swarm like a battering ram. Its shields failed. Hull breaches appeared across 12 decks, but Day kept pushing forward. The ship literally landed on Frontier Station's landing pad, surrounded by devourers tearing at its hull. Major Su's survivors fought their way aboard. They were exhausted, injured, half dead from 14 hours of combat. But they were alive. The last soldier aboard, Su sealed the airlock and screamed into the communication system, "We're aboard! Get us out of here." The Defiant lifted off with devourers still clinging to its hull. Point defense systems scraped them off. The ship climbed into orbit, engines screaming. Behind them, Frontier Station exploded as the devourers overwhelmed it. But every human had been evacuated. The rescue fleet limped back to friendly space. 40% of ships were damaged or destroyed. Captain Jin survived but lost his ship for the second time. Casualties were severe. The holographic displays filled the entire chamber in Geneva. Every major nation and colony on Earth was represented. President Yoon sat at the head of the table, her face tired but focused. She had called this emergency session within hours of receiving Admiral Day's report from Mars Station. The debate had already lasted 6 hours. "They abandoned us," General Petrov said, his Russian accent thick with anger. 300 years ago they called us savages and locked us away. Now they come crawling back because they need us. I say let them burn. Ambassador Hana from the Korean Federation shook her head. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us isolated in the first place. We can't let grudges determine our actions. Billions of innocent people are dying. Species that had nothing to do with the quarantine are being consumed. Hana's right, said another representative. Besides, if the devourers consume the collective, do we really think they'll stop at our borders? We're next. It's just a matter of time. The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was true. The devourers wouldn't distinguish between the collective and humanity. They consumed everything. Hiding behind the quarantine line wouldn't save Earth. It would just delay the inevitable. President Yoon stood. I'm calling for a vote. All in favor of military intervention to assist the collective union against the devourer threat, raise your hand. The vote was close, very close, but it passed. Humanity would go to war. Yoon turned to Admiral Day, who had been watching via hologram from Mars. Admiral, draft our terms. Make them understand that if we fight our way. Dai smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Already done, Madam President. Ambassador Talon received the terms 2 hours later. He read them with growing alarm. Complete operational control. Access to all collective resources and territory. Full diplomatic recognition and an end to the quarantine after the war. The terms were harsh. But Talon had no choice, he signed. Earth's response was immediate and overwhelming. Shipyards across the solar system roared to life. Ships that had been in construction for years were rushed to completion. Weapons that had been theoretical were suddenly real. Humanity had been preparing for this moment without knowing when it would come. Captain Jin watched from the observation deck as the battle carrier Incheon launched from Seoul Orbital. The ship was enormous, bristling with weapon systems. It carried enough firepower to crack a small moon, and it was just one of 50 ships assembling for the first wave. On Luna, Major Su supervised the loading of her mechanized assault battalion. 3,000 soldiers in powered armor, equipped with weapons designed for one purpose, overwhelming force. Her troops had trained for years in simulation. Now they would see real combat. Commander Tay worked in his laboratory on Earth, making final adjustments to the AI combat drones. These weren't simple machines. They learned from every encounter, adapted to enemy tactics, and coordinated with frightening efficiency. He uploaded the final protocols and sent them to the fleet. His hands shook slightly. He knew what these weapons could do. He hoped it would be enough. The first human fleet assembled at the edge of the quarantine zone. 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering. They were smaller than collective defense fleets but carried 10 times the firepower. Admiral Day stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant. Around her, crew members worked with calm efficiency. All ships report ready, Admiral, her tactical officer reported. Day nodded. She activated the fleet-wide communication. This is Admiral Day to all vessels. 300 years ago, the collective called us monsters. They feared our capacity for violence. They locked us away because we fought too hard, too mean, too effectively. She paused. Today we prove them right. We are going into battle against an enemy that has consumed 17 species. They will learn what it means to face Earth's monsters. All ships jump to hyperspace. Destination Viridian Prime. The fleet vanished in pulses of distorted light. They emerged in hell. Viridian Prime was surrounded by devourer hive ships. The massive organic vessels pulsed with sickly green light. Thousands of smaller craft swarmed between them. The collective defense fleet was gone, reduced to burning wreckage. The planet below was already under assault. Cities burned. Billions were dying. Tactical assessment, Day ordered. 6 major hive ships, thousands of support craft. They're landing ground forces. Estimate 3 hours before the planet falls completely. Day didn't hesitate. All ships weapons free. Target the hive ships. Fire at will. The human fleet opened fire. Kinetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at relativistic speeds. Plasma torpedoes streaked through space. Missile pods opened, releasing swarms of smart munitions. The devourers, used to the collective's slow, measured responses, were caught completely by surprise. 2 hive ships exploded before they could react. The organic vessels ruptured, spilling biomatter and smaller craft into space. But the devourers were fast learners. Their organic shields began adapting, absorbing the energy weapons. What had worked moments ago became ineffective. Aboard a collective observation ship, Ambassador Talon watched in horror. They're adapting, he whispered. Just like they did to our weapons. The humans have failed. But then Day gave a new order. Switch to kinetic weapons only. Let's see them adapt to physics. The human ship stopped using energy weapons. Instead, they fired solid projectiles. Simple tungsten rods accelerated to incredible speeds. No energy signature to adapt to. Just pure kinetic force obeying Newton's laws. The devourer's organic shields meant nothing. The rods punched through like paper. Another hive ship cracked open. Then another. The devourer swarms tried to overwhelm the human ships with sheer numbers. Thousands of biocraft rushed toward the fleet. But the humans had prepared for this too. Point defense systems activated, creating walls of gunfire that shredded anything that came close. Launch ground forces, Day ordered. Major Sue's battalion launched from their carriers in drop pods. They fell toward Viridian Prime like meteors, punching through the atmosphere at speeds that would kill unprotected humans. The pods crashed down in the middle of the devourer swarm that had surrounded the last collective survivors. The pods opened. Soldiers in powered armor emerged, weapons blazing. They used flamethrowers that turned devourers into ash. They used explosive rounds that tore through the organic creatures. They fought with brutal efficiency, showing no mercy and taking no prisoners. Kira, watching from the observation ship, touched Talon's arm. Her telepathic abilities were picking up something new from the devourer hive mind. They're afraid, she whispered in shock. I can feel it. The devourers are experiencing fear. On the surface, Major Sue's troops pushed forward. The devourers threw everything at them, but human tactics were overwhelming. The soldiers worked in perfect coordination, covering each other, advancing steadily. When ammunition ran low, they used the suits themselves as weapons, crushing devourers under powered fists. Captain Jin's ship, the Incheon, pursued fleeing devourer craft. His weapons officer called out targets and Jin eliminated them without hesitation. A small part of him felt sick at the slaughter. But a larger part remembered the images of consumed worlds. This was necessary. This was survival. 6 hours after the battle began, it was over. The devourer hive ships were destroyed or fleeing. The swarm on the surface was eliminated. Viridian Prime was saved, though scarred. Human ships hung in orbit, damaged but intact. The collective survivors emerged from their shelters cautiously. But they weren't relieved. They were terrified. The humans had saved them, yes. But the violence, the efficiency, the cold brutality of it shocked them. These weren't heroes. These were killers who happened to be on their side. Ambassador Talon stood on the observation deck staring at the human fleet. Kira stood beside him, tears running down her face. What have we done? Talon whispered. We asked for monsters. We got them. Admiral Day sent a transmission to Earth and broadcast it to the entire collective. Her face appeared on millions of screens across hundreds of worlds. First battle won. The enemy is vulnerable to sustained kinetic assault and thermal weapons. They can feel fear now. I'm requesting authorization to pursue and establish forward operating bases in collective space. She paused, her expression hard. The monsters are going hunting. News of the victory spread across the collective union within hours. Some species celebrated. Others whispered in fear. Humanity had announced their presence to the galaxy in the most violent way possible. The Devourers had retreated, but everyone knew they would return with greater numbers. On Earth, Commander Tay watched the battle footage in his laboratory. His AI drones had performed perfectly, learning and adapting throughout the fight. But watching the carnage made him feel hollow. His assistant asked if he was pleased with the results. "Pleased?" Tay replied quietly. "We just showed the galaxy what 300 years of isolated military development looks like. We proved every fear they had about us was justified. The Devourers aren't the only ones who should be afraid now." President Yoon addressed Earth that night. Today, humanity returned to the galactic stage. We did so with violence, yes, but also with purpose. We fought to save billions of lives. We fought to stop a threat that would have eventually reached our own worlds. The alarm echoed through every corridor of the Harmony Nexus station. Ambassador Talon dropped the data tablet he was reading and rushed toward the central chamber. His reptilian scales shifted from calm green to alarmed yellow. Something terrible was happening. He could feel it in his bones. The central chamber was chaos. Hundreds of holographic displays floated in the air, each showing a different world under attack. Talon watched in horror as massive organic ships descended on peaceful colonies. The creatures that emerged were nightmares made real. They looked like insects but moved with terrifying intelligence. They consumed everything. Buildings, crops, people. Nothing was left behind except bare rock. Counselor Mira materialized beside him, her crystalline body pulsing with distress. 17 species, she said quietly. Gone in 3 weeks. Completely consumed. We don't even have bodies to bury. Talon stared at the displays. He had served the collective union for 50 years. He had seen wars, famines, and natural disasters. But nothing like this. The creatures adapted to every weapon instantly. Energy shields meant nothing to them. Projectile weapons only slowed them down. They learned and evolved faster than anyone could defend. What are they? Talon asked. We call them the Devourers, replied Counselor Wex, an elderly aquatic being floating in his suspension tank. They came from dark space. We don't know if they're refugees or invaders. It doesn't matter anymore. They're eating the galaxy alive. The emergency council meeting began within the hour. Representatives from 200 species filled the chamber, some in person, most via hologram. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The collective had maintained peace for 3,000 years through diplomacy and cooperation. Their military forces were designed to keep peace, not fight wars. They were completely unprepared for an enemy that wanted only to consume. Counselor Mira proposed the unthinkable. We need to contact the humans. The chamber erupted. Some representatives shouted in anger. Others simply disconnected their holograms in protest. The humans. The monsters locked away in their corner of space for 300 years. The species too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to join civilized society. Talon remembered first contact with humanity. He had been young then, serving as a junior ambassador. The humans had defended one of their colonies from pirates using tactics that shocked the collective observers. They boarded enemy ships. They used electromagnetic weapons that disabled systems. They fought with a ferocity that seemed savage. When the battle ended, the collective had labeled humanity as warmongers and imposed a quarantine. The humans had protested, arguing they were only defending themselves. The collective didn't listen. Humanity was isolated and forgotten. They're too dangerous, argued one representative. We condemned them for violence. Now you want to unleash them? Counselor Wex spoke, his voice carrying the weight of age and experience. I was there during first contact. I watched humans fight. Yes, they were violent, but they were also effective. The pirates surrendered within hours. Do you know why? He paused. Because humans don't fight to look civilized. They fight to win. The debate continued for hours. Species after species argued against involving humanity, but the reports kept coming in. More worlds falling. More populations consumed. The Devourers were getting closer to the core systems. Soon they would reach worlds with billions of inhabitants. Finally, a vote was called. It passed by the smallest margin possible. The collective would send an envoy to Earth. They would ask for help from the species they had condemned and isolated. They would beg the monsters to save them. Talon volunteered immediately. His aide Kira, A young telepathic species with large eyes and gentle features insisted on joining him. "Someone needs to make sure you come back alive," she said with a nervous smile. Their small diplomatic ship approached the edge of human space 3 days later. The moment they crossed the quarantine boundary, alarms screamed. Weapons locked onto their vessel. Within seconds, they were surrounded by 24 human warships. Talon had never seen ships like these. They were angular and aggressive, covered in weapons he didn't recognize. No wasted space, no artistic design, pure function. Built for one purpose only. "Unidentified vessel, you have violated Terran-restricted space," and a cold voice announced. "State your purpose or be destroyed." Talon activated the communication system with shaking hands. "This is Ambassador Talon of the Collective Union. We come seeking urgent diplomatic contact. We need Earth's help. Please, we're not armed. Don't shoot." Silence. Long, terrible silence. Talon could feel Kira's fear through her telepathic aura. The human ships didn't move. They just waited, weapons trained on the small diplomatic vessel. Finally, a response came. "Proceed to Mars Station. Maintain current speed. Any deviation will be considered hostile. Welcome to human space, Ambassador." Mars Station loomed before them hours later. It was massive. A military installation orbiting the red planet. Hundreds of ships docked at various levels. Talon saw training exercises happening in nearby space. Human soldiers in powered armor practiced boarding maneuvers. Fighter craft performed combat drills. This wasn't a peaceful society. This was a civilization that had spent 3 centuries preparing for war. They were escorted to a conference room deep inside the station. The walls were bare metal. No decorations, no comfort, just functionality. Talon and Kira waited for 20 minutes before the door opened. Admiral Day entered. She was tall for a human, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. Cybernetic implants ran along her neck and arms, marking her as a veteran of combat. She didn't smile. She didn't offer any gesture of welcome. She simply sat down and stared at them. "You have 5 minutes," Day said. "Explain why the collective suddenly wants to talk after 300 years of silence." Talon explained everything. The devourers, the consumed species, the failed defenses. He showed her the data, the images of destroyed worlds. He tried to convey the desperation, the horror of watching civilization crumble. When he finished, Day remained silent, studying the information. "You called us monsters," Day finally said. "You locked us away because we fought too hard, too mean, too effective. You said we were too dangerous for civilized space." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Mars below. "Now you want those monsters to save you." "Yes," Talon said quietly. "We were wrong to isolate you. We admit that. But billions are dying. Entire species are being erased from existence. We need help, please." Dee turned back to face them. Her expression was unreadable. "I'll take your request to Earth's Security Council. But understand something, Ambassador. If humanity agrees to help, we don't fight your way. We fight ours. We use tactics you'll find brutal. We make decisions you'll find ruthless. And you might discover that unleashing Earth's monsters is more terrifying than facing the devourers." Kira gasped softly, picking up the emotional weight behind Day's words. The Admiral wasn't threatening them. She was warning them. Humanity had spent 3 centuries isolated, angry and preparing. They had built weapons and strategies the collective couldn't imagine. They had become exactly what the collective feared. "We understand," Talon said, though he wasn't sure he did. "No," Day replied. "You don't, but you will." The door opened and 2 armed soldiers entered. "Escort our guests to quarters," Day ordered. "Make them comfortable. They're going to be here a while." As Talon and Kira were led away, the ambassador looked back. Admiral Day stood at the window, staring at the red planet below. In that moment, Talon wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. They came seeking salvation. They might have invited something worse than the devourers into the galaxy. But it was too late now. The plea had been made. Earth would answer, and the galaxy would never be the same.